What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to talk about what happens when you have a budget setback. Budget setbacks are super frustrating, whether it's an unexpected expense that came up that you didn't account for, or you accidentally overspent in a category in your budget. Whatever the reason is, it can be really frustrating and feel really demotivating when you have a setback on your budget and just have to totally scrap the month and start over. But in today's video I'm going to give you some quick tips on what to do when you have a setback. So the first thing you want to do for sure is get current. So if you have any bills that you've fallen behind in because of your budget setback, then you want to make those bills a priority to make sure you're not behind on any of your bills. That way you can avoid late penalties and interest fees and any hit to your credit score by paying something late. So getting current is the #1 priority. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have a funded emergency fund. So if you didn't have an emergency fund and that's why you had a setback in your budget, or your emergency fund wasn't big enough for whatever happened, then you want to make sure that you build up your emergency fund. Even if you have debt, even if you have other things you're trying to do, an emergency fund is such an important thing to have when you are trying to accomplish any financial goal. It's like step 1 after getting current is get an emergency fund before you do anything else with your money. How much you should have in your emergency fund is a really personal question, and I've made a couple of videos about emergency funds that I'll link in the video description, but to me, I think at least a couple $1,000s for most people is a good start, and at least 1 month of expenses is ideal for your minimum emergency fund, but that might be too much for some people to get saved up initially. So at least a couple $1,000s, and for a lot of people a couple $1,000s may be enough to cover 1 month of expenses. The next thing you want to do, and actually you don't have to wait till your emergency fund is saved up to do this next step, is you want to account for whatever happened in your budget setback in future budgets. So if it was a car repair that you hadn't budgeted for, or an annual fee that you forgot about, you want to make sure that that's something you're accounting for in future budgets, whether it's a category in your budget for annual fees or a car sinking fund or something to that effect. Those expenses that are kind of random and miscellaneous aren't so random and miscellaneous. We just don't know when they're going to come up, but we know for sure that they're going to come up, that we're going to get a flat tire at some point, or we're going to have, a last minute medical bill come in or something like that. These things happen in life, and so you want to adjust your budget so when that type of expense comes up in the future that you aren't surprised by it and it's already built into your budget. If you're not sure how to do sinking funds, I share on my channel every single month my budget before the month starts and then after the month has ended to show you how we did for our own budgeting for the month. And in my budget I've got a lot of sinking funds, and so I would definitely check out my budgeting videos if you want to learn more about how to use sinking funds. All right, the next thing you want to look at if you have a budget setback is, was this actually an emergency? Was it something that you needed to pay for, or was it an accident and you overspent in a category, maybe through some impulse spending? And kind of take a second and reflect on what happened in your budget that month. Was it something that was avoidable or unavoidable? If it's something like you went to Target and you spent too much money and you got things that weren't on your list, something you can do is you can go back and return those items. Like if you went over budget and you're feeling disappointed, you can always return those items. And if they aren't necessities and they weren't budgeted for in your budget categories, then they're probably things that can wait until later or another month or until you have saved up for them. So if you bought something that is returnable, like you didn't buy a bunch of extra snacks that you ate, like if you can actually return the item, then consider returning it. Is the joy of having the item outweighing the disappointment of the budget setback or not? And if the joy doesn't outweigh having the item, then returning the item is a great solution that can resolve your budget setback. And then my last tip for when you have a budget setback is don't give up. It is frustrating when you have a setback, but if you give up on budgeting altogether, you're going to be in a much worse place than if you just keep pushing and get through that setback and learn some lessons from it and adjust. And sometimes with budgeting, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it is so worth it to get good at budgeting because it builds so many other skills that are important for financial success in general. The only way that you are going to get better at budgeting is by continuing to practice. And you're not necessarily going to be great at budgeting day 1 right out the gate. It's going to take time and energy to learn and practice to get good at budgeting, but as you do it more and more, it becomes more comfortable, and then it feels really good when you have money set aside and you've planned for things that come up. For example, a few months ago, my husband's car failed inspection, and so he had to go get some things repaired, and we have a car sinking fund, and so we didn't have quite enough for the whole repair, but we covered a lot of the repair through the sinking fund, and then we had a plan through future budgets to replenish that sinking fund. And so when that expense came up, we weren't totally lost with no money trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it, or just putting that expense on a credit card and accumulating more debt. We had anticipated the need for money for a car repair and had planned for it and had been budgeting for it. And so when that kind of setback happened, we were able to adapt and still accomplish all of our goals, still stay current with all of our bills, still pay extra payments towards our debt that month, and push forward in all the things we were doing and not feel discouraged. Once you get good at budgeting, I promise you it can be really fun and not that time consuming. Right now, my husband and I meet for like 15 minutes a week and do budgeting. So that's like an hour a month that we're spending on our budget. I do spend a little bit of time outside of that, like setting up our budget for the next month. So let's say an hour and a half total on budgeting for the month. It's really not a large amount of time. It's a couple episodes of a show on Netflix, like that amount of time, and you've set yourself up for financial success for the month. It's also something that doesn't require you to be great at math. You just have to be able to do simple addition and subtraction. And if you use a budgeting spreadsheet like the one that I use, which is actually available for purchase in my Etsy shop, and I'll link that in the video description as well, then you don't even have to calculate anything yourself. You just put the numbers into a cell and it automatically totals for you, and you don't have to do any math at all. So budgeting is something that anybody can do. You just have to decide that you want to do it, but it is such a good skill. It really improves your finances. And even though there's setbacks, those setbacks are really learning opportunities for expenses that were going to come up anyway. Whether or not you have a budget, those expenses, those setbacks are going to come up, and having a budget makes it infinitely less stressful than it would if you just had no plan for your money and no idea how you were going to pay for these random expenses that come up. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you have any other tips of what you do when you have a budget setback, then put it in the comments below. I always love to interact with you guys in the comments and see if you guys have any other ideas that I didn't mention in my videos. If you like this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. And if you want to see more videos like this from me, then hit that red subscribe button down there. I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and I'll see you guys soon in my next video. Bye.